Hello everybody, I'm Radioactive, and this is K25R. Now there's been some debate on what the R really means. Could mean radioactive. A lot of people say it does. That's one part of it. Reimagined, refined, and ready to go. Those are some of the R words that I would use to describe this spring. There's some others, robust. There's some good R words for this. This spring is a 15 kilogram max draw or max compression, 18.4 joules at max compression, 58% stress. That's wall stress as a percentage of total tensile strength of the wire itself. There's a lot of specs here that I could just be listing off. The same outer diameter as normal K25, same inner, same mean diameter, same wire diameter as normal K25, 27 coils rather than 24 coils, but that's because this is a 12-inch spring as opposed to the standard 11-inch. These are also closed and ground ends. The spring rate is lower than, I believe it's lower than every other one. Yeah, it's lower than every other K25 and K25 Plus variant on the market. Now, 15 kilograms, that's compared to 14.4, 14.5, somewhere in there, depends on the exact spring and the tolerances of the spring. It doesn't sound like a huge jump, does it? Lower spring rate, 3.3636 pound force per inch compared to 3.5001. Just by those numbers, you'd think this is a weaker spring. It's not. Compared to normal K25, which ranges from 16 to 16.6 depending on the variant. Like we'll look here, SF25, that's actually 15.75. Same for the normal K25, or the out of darts K25. Normal K25 is 16.3. Out of darts K25F, which was a failed, like a misprint basically of a spring, was 16.64. Mine is 18.4. 2 joules more potential energy at max draw than any other normal K25. Now, by the numbers, there are K25s that are stronger than this one. Pro 25, Drop Bear K25, Silver Fox SF25 plus 2, those are all technically stronger springs. The problem is, all of them are significantly more stressed. Drop Bear is 62, Pro 25 is 64, SF25 plus 2 is 70 something, and just for the record, SF25 and out of darts K25 are 52, and regular K25 is, oh, actually, I lied. They're 55. And then normal K25, being hard drawn instead of music wire, is 70%. Now, what those percentages mean, it really just means that some of these springs will set faster and further. For example, the strongest K25 spring is a Silver Fox. I almost said Survival Fest. Silver Fox 25 plus 2. That's like 22 joules of potential and like 19 to 20 kilograms. After 10 primes to anywhere near max compression, its length drops from 11 inches to 10 inches, stays at 63, if I remember correctly, 63% stressed, goes down to 18.4 joules of potential, and 17.5 kilograms. This spring has way better stress characteristics than any of the competition, and that's just math. There's no countering that, unless for like somehow I have just completely fucked up my measurements of various springs, which I'm not perfect, but I've been doing this for a long time. I know what I'm doing. This spring, let's compare it to some normal K25s. Compared to normal K25, out of darts K25, the K25 standard stock derivatives, even with the closed ends. This has the same solid length as SF25 and out of darts 25, and the K25F that out of darts had. Same solid as that. So if any of those springs fit in your blaster, this spring will fit in your blaster. This spring will be a direct FPS upgrade without actually feeling any heavier. Now, there have been a couple of people who said, oh yeah, I can't really tell. It might be a little bit, like a fraction heavier. Most people say that it's about the same. People who are self-described as being pretty sensitive to load changes, they actually say this is a little bit lighter. Like Norman from Big Blaster Consortium, or Secondhand Blasters, he says this is about the same or even a little bit lighter than regular K25, and this is a K25 plus type spring. It fits in the K25 plus groupings of springs. Compared to normal K25s, this spring is about 10% faster for the same load. So if you're hitting 300 FPS, it'll hit about 330. If you're hitting 320, it's hitting 350. If you're hitting 200, that's 220-ish. So if you're hitting 290 with a 1 gram dart, you might be hitting 190 with a 1.3 gram, or even faster with a 1.3 gram. It just has more potential energy. It has more pre-compression than other springs. Now, that's only if you use the full length. If you use the same, like for example, if you cut this down to 12 coils and compared it versus a regular K25, this will be about 7% better. It gets its benefits, a lot of its benefits, from being longer. Now, let's backtrack a little bit. You're saying, how can this actually be lighter? If the max load is higher, there's more potential energy, there's more pre-compression. That's actually because of the spring rate. Now, if you remember, I said that the spring rate was less than any other K25 derivative. Maybe not the -1 or -2 that Silverflex has, but I'm not competing with that. I'm not trying to compete with them in that lower K25 type. Or I guess any of the out of darts tuning springs that are technically a K25 derivative. I'm not trying to compete down there. I'm trying to make blasters stronger. If you cut it down to the same coil count, it'll actually be a longer spring, so you'll get a little bit more pre-compression. If you cut it down to the same length, it's still better, but it's, again, you're not going to see a huge increase. This spring is also longer, so you can cut it down half. It's two 6-inch springs instead of two 5.5 inch. Or if you did 3, 3, 3, and 3, you'd have 4 springs instead of 3 springs and a 2-inch cutoff. Or you could do 4, 4, and 4, or 5, 4, and 3, just as examples. Now, versus the stronger springs, all of those have a way higher stress, which means they're going to settle pretty far and very fast. Which means that, yes, initially, those springs will be faster. But this spring isn't going to set nearly as fast on you. All springs set, eventually it's going to set a little bit, but it's not going to set to nearly the difference. Like, back to the example of the SF25. That pretty much immediately settles to about 10 inches. Higher load, higher spring rate, it's going to feel worse to prime, and have basically the same performance as this spring will after 50, 100 shots. And actually, the stress of this spring full length is still better than a settled SF25 plus 2. In actual applications, if you're wanting to hit 300 FPS, this spring, being lighter felt draw, and the same performance is going to do you better than... I keep going back to SF25, but that's the strongest K25 spring there is, so it's the best one to compare against. This spring will do you better. Now, yes, there are some instances where this spring isn't going to be your best bet. If you want to go down in performance, it's not going to be your best bet. If you want to do a 150 war or an HVZ, and you're using half lengths, this isn't going to be your best bet. Now, maybe if you decide you're doing shotgun out of like a shellfish or a breacher or any of those shotgun type blasters, this might be a better spring for you. It might get a little bit more performance, and those shotgun spreads a little bit more consistent. And this spring in testing is actually even more consistent than any of the other springs that have been tested against. SF25 out of Darts 25. Those are the main ones that these have been tested against. There have been a couple of tests versus SF25 where the SF25 plus 2 is about 10% better than this spring for about 50 shots, and then they kind of equalize. I mean, I'm just kind of sitting here talking. I don't actually have a blaster that takes K25. Full K25. Of course, my Radson does take a 2.75 length of K25. If I were to put the same number of coils in that blaster, this would be 2.86. It's like 2 FPS if I were to put this spring in there. I have a Sobek that hasn't been properly maintained in 5 years. And it's a shotgun. Okay, sure. 80 FPS versus 85. Cool. I have a Ranger that doesn't take K25 anymore because I've modified it so much. I don't actually have any blasters to take my own spring that I've designed, which is crazy. That's why I've had to lean on some testers. Now, Zafk, that's how I'm going to pronounce her name. Zafk, in Discord, they tested in a Lonks concept, and the numbers back it up. I believe they were hitting around 330, 340-ish. With my spring, like 350 to 360 with the SF25 plus 2, and like closer to 310 with standard K25 derivatives. That was a brand new SF25 plus 2. Use it in a few games. Come back to me. Norman tested some standard springs and got a 20 to 30 FPS, sometimes 40 FPS increase over standard K25, and this felt better to prime. You're not losing anything for the performance. This is all the pros, none of the cons. For this spring, there have been no... Oh, I've lost the word. I just had the word. There have been no sacrifices. The load, the felt prime, the stress, nothing... the word's right there. No consequences? No, that's not quite right. Damn it. It's right there. It's a con word. Shit. Oh well. No sacrifices have been made. The load, the potential energy, the pre-compression. Actually, this spring, let's assume 50% efficiency. This spring's technically capable of about 440 FPS. In the right setup. Max draw, max compression, 1 gram darts. Theoretically capable of 440. Normal K25 is actually capable of about 400 FPS at 50% efficiency. Nobody's ever done it before. As far as I know, no K25 derivative has done over 400 FPS before by itself. I would love to see somebody do that. That'd be so fun to see. J. That's G. I think it's J. J in Discord, otherwise known as Shoeless Historian, great designer. Got about 3 lengths of K25R to test. And in Dolores? I want to say Dolores, but it's Dolores, I'm pretty sure. They typically hit about 270 or so with their normal K25. Might have even been SF25, normal SF25. It hadn't seen maintenance in a little while, so it was hitting a little low, 20 FPS low. This spring was still 50 FPS high. About 320 to 330. No maintenance done, 1 take in testing, on video. 70 FPS difference, 1 gram darts. Frankly ridiculous, insane performance jump, and again, similar prime weight. So, Zafk, I don't actually know. They don't actually see a use for this, specifically for them, because it's too fast for their specific cases. They have K25 perfectly tuned to meet a 300 cap. This will hit too high for that. Now, there's a use case there. If they wanted to go to 1.3 gram darts, this spring potentially could bring them to that 300 FPS cap. So, their specific use case, meeting caps with heavier darts. This spring, for Norman, completely replaces K25. By their own admission, their own words, this spring replaces all other K25 for them. J. They are in a similar boat. This, even at the price of $8, I can't believe I haven't actually said that that's $8 yet. Even at the price, completely replaces K25s for them. Moose, Misplaced Moose. I've actually been talking to them, and they are very interested in making K25R the base spring for their designs. Elk, bear, the moose platforms. Just because it is stronger. Closed ground ends. All of the benefits I've been talking to you about so far. This spring has it all. Maybe it's not the absolute, you're not going to get the absolute highest numbers, but over the course of 2 years, this spring is the fastest spring on average. It's the best K25. But I think I'll leave the rest up to you. Now, there's, of course, going to be a link in the description if you've got this far, maybe we'll do a little promo code. Actually, we'll see. Actually, yeah, we'll do a promo code. Promo code best K25 for 15% off K25R specific orders. I think that's something I'll do from now on. Specific promo codes. We'll say that this will last until what's today? The 19th, the 18th, somewhere in there. We'll say it lasts until the end of August, 2026. I can do that. I feel like there's more that I wanted to talk about. Let me actually look over this real quick. Let's see. Max load, max potential energy, spring rate. We've talked about all that. Free length, outer diameter, wire diameter, total coils. It's one more total coil than a normal closed coil K25. Normal closed coil K25s, they just add one coil to the end and then close that off so it retains the same length. Mine is actually 27 and it's closed and ground. So that extra coil does not interfere with the solid length or solid height. Solid height 2.16, same as everything else except for the open-ended K25. Compression length. So this is the total length that the spring can compress to. 8.84 for K25 and SF K25. 9.08 and 9.09 for K25 and K25F. Mine's 9.84 inches. So you can get a higher compression length. Like a higher draw for your blaster. Mean diameter is the exact same. Inner diameter the exact same. Coils per inch. Now, the coils per inch might actually be relatively interesting for some people. 2.25 coils per inch. So, for example, if you wanted a 6-inch spring, that's 2.25 times 6, so 9.25? No. 6, 2.25, 1.125, 2 times 6, 13, we'll call it 13.5 coils for 6 inches. Music wire, of course, closing ground. Stress percentages. Right hand wind. Typical right hand wind. The safe load is the exact same as any other K25 with the same outer diameter and the same wire diameter. The safe length is a little bit longer. It is a little bit higher stressed than normal K25s, but so much lower stress than K25 plus springs, the actual grouping of springs that this spring fits into. It blows every other normal K25 out of the water, and really competes pretty well with all of the other stronger K25 plus type springs. I think that's it. There's nothing else. If this spring fits, if your blaster fits a normal K25 with closed ends, this'll fit in there. Caliburn, anything like that. And don't forget promo code BETTER K25. Well, that's it. This has been K25. K25. Reimagined. Refined. Ready. You know it could only be from Radioactive. I'm Radioactive. And I hope you have a great day. Wherever you are. Whatever you're doing.